Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. I'm making this the day after a series of fights took place. Let me briefly talk about those fights, and then let's get on to talking about Floyd Mayweather and the middleweight title. Okay, first, for VIP members, Cornelius Brundage delivered. He got the KO over Corey Spinks. Right? That minus 300 held. You should have gotten a 33% rate of return. Also, the over 8.5 rounds at plus 140. Backing out the hedge, it's a plus 40 profit delivered in the Erislandy Lara versus Freddie Hernandez fight. Let me just point out, I know Lara won the fight. I know he's highly regarded. Just understand how much the sports books overvalued Lara. Lara was expected, according to the over-under, to close the show in less than 8.5 rounds. You got better than even money. You got a plus 140 on the over 8.5 rounds. Well, Lara didn't come close to closing the show. That fight went the distance. One judge, in fact, had it a 115-114 score. Right? The point simply is, as good as Lara is, and he's very good, he's overrated. He shouldn't have been a 17-1 favorite. Just imagine, to win $40 if you didn't use our straddle, where 100 on each side would have netted you $40 profit. If you instead just took Lara straight up yesterday, you literally would have had to have bet, since he was a 17-1 favorite. Think about that. In a fight that ultimately went the distance, you would have had to have bet 17 times the $40 to get the same level of profit. The market will eventually adjust on Lara. Just understand that as slick as he is, as good as he is, he's overrated. Okay, let me also say too, on some fights I didn't make calls on. In my opinion, I know today the headline's going to read, Roy Jones won last night. In my opinion, Roy Jones looked awful. Understand, this is not the same Roy Jones. The only thing this Roy Jones has in common with the 1990s era Roy Jones is the name. Right? Roy Jones seems to have lost his legs. He couldn't move around the ring. There was a time where it was hard to close the distance between yourself and Roy Jones. You couldn't find him. He found you. You couldn't find him. This Roy Jones you can find with regularity. In fact, if you get up on him and you throw a combination, he'll block the first few punches. He won't block the last few. He got dropped in the fight. He got off the canvas. Quite frankly, the scoring easily could have gone the other way. And keep in mind, he was fighting a guy who took the fight on something like less than 2 weeks' notice. He did not look good. Let me go one step further and say, I know the world right now is down on Corey Spinks. It shouldn't be. Now, granted, this 34-year-old Corey Spinks loses to prime Corey Spinks. I'm not saying he's not on the way down, as most fighters are, with a lot of mileage in their mid-30s, right? But understand, he was fighting an underrated fighter. Cornelius Brundage, at this stage, is vastly underrated. I think he's the opposite of Erislandy Lara, right? And Brundage, as he said in the post-fight interview, now, I don't believe pre-fight interviews that much, but I do listen to post-fight interviews. He doesn't even worry too much about throwing a jab. He's an older fighter who knows how to stay outside your range, then jump inside with hooks. I think it's really a stylistic matchup that got to Corey Spinks. I believe Corey Spinks still has gas left in the tank. He just can't fight the kind of fighter who can literally move away from him like Brundage does and then come in with hooks. In a sense, Brundage is like Orlando Salido. And these fighters are very hard to fight for technicians who aren't expecting you to recklessly come in with hooks. Brundage, by the way, in my opinion, should be on a short list of people Saul Alvarez considers fighting next. Brundage is world class. In fact, he has one of the titles. Okay, now enough with yesterday. Let's try to stay ahead of the curve, right? And let's talk about boxing in a way that's outside the mainstream narrative right now. Now, the best division right now in boxing, in terms of what's happening, is the middleweight division. No other division comes close. You have 2 sets of champions, 4 guys with belts who have decided they're going to fight each other. It's really stunning, right? So you have Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and he's fighting Sergio Martinez in an obvious fight of the year candidate. Now, I understand that there seems to be a feud between promoters over who owns the day of the fight, because Saul Alvarez wants to fight on that day as well. Let me just say this. Whoever Saul Alvarez fights, the fight is not going to be as noteworthy as this fight, right? If I were just out of an allegiance to boxing, if I were Saul Alvarez's people, knowing that he doesn't have an opponent right now, I would vacate the date so that these 2 middleweights in a unification match can have the date, because it's the more meaningful matchup. Well, understand that's just one of 2 big-time fights in the middleweight division. You also have unbeaten Dmitry Pirog fighting unbeaten Gennady Golovkin. Now, if you don't know those names, you need to, because in my opinion, Pirog is one of the best pound for pound in the sport. And Gennady Golovkin, who cares about my opinion? Gennady Golovkin, as an amateur, beat Lucien Boutte, beat Andre Durrell, beat Andy Lee. In other words, he's beaten some of the big-time talents right now in the sport, right? He was a silver medalist in the Olympics. He's a former amateur champion. Right now, he is an unbeaten middleweight champion. No division in boxing has 2 more meaningful fights set up than this middleweight division. Well, understand that there's a story, because, of course, this is boxing. And so somehow Dmitry Pirog, who has chosen to fight another unbeaten champion, is on the verge of getting stripped of his own title, because he's fighting, of course, one of the other champions, right? This is boxing. It wouldn't make sense unless we were in this sports Alice in Wonderland world. Well, understand that if Dmitry Pirog gets stripped, in fact, let's be clearer. When Dmitry Pirog gets stripped for taking on another champion, his belt is going to be awarded to France's unbeaten Hassan Njikum, right? Njikum would be crowned the middleweight champion of the world. Well, there is a guy out there. He's on boxing's very short list of men who will take on all comers, even at the highest levels. He belongs on this short list's Mount Rushmore, along with the Road Warrior Glenn Johnson, along with champion Carl Froch, along with Evander Holyfield, who's still campaigning to fight the Klitschkos, and who, in his prime, fought Bo, fought Tyson, and then later fought Lennox Lewis. And this fighter is a fighter who fought Antonio Margarito twice, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Zab Judah, Carlos Quintana, many, many more. His name is Miguel Cotto. And Miguel Cotto, behind the scenes, is jockeying to fight Hassan Njikum for the middleweight championship of the world this December. Now let's hope this fight comes off, right? Njikum is unbeaten. He's a mover who operates behind a jab, right? But understand, even though I took Floyd Mayweather against Miguel Cotto when they fought, just understand that styles make fights. Miguel Cotto's style is exactly the kind of style that would give Hassan Njikum nightmares. Just look at Njikum's fight against Avtandil Coetzee. Now let me just say, Njikum is about 5'11". Miguel Cotto is 5'7". Coetzee was 5'4", right? All I'm saying is Njikum, like Ali against Frazier, has a problem with shorter guys who will fearlessly come inside and press the issue. And if you saw the 12 rounds of Cotto Mayweather, you know that Miguel Cotto is still hungry, right? Whatever riches he's had in the past, whatever big paydays, and he's had many, right? Keep in mind, this is a guy who fought Floyd and Manny. Whatever big multiple paydays he's had in the past, right? He had a crowd of 20,000 people when he fought Yuri Foreman in Yankee Stadium. Miguel Cotto is still hungry. Miguel Cotto is still trying to bring it. Miguel Cotto is still trying to pin you up on the ropes. He's still trying to cut off the ring. I believe Miguel Cotto would be a live underdog against Hassan Njikum. I think he has a chance to win that fight. And if Cotto fights and wins the middleweight championship this December, it sets up one hellacious rematch with Floyd Mayweather next year, only this time they'd be fighting for the middleweight championship of the world, right? My point to you is simply, forget Mayweather versus Pacquiao. Floyd has bigger fish to fry at the 160 weight class, where neither he nor Pacquiao has ever fought. And understand too, the fight is an easy sell because, of course, the first fight was a blockbuster. It was box office gold, right? The first fight was box office gold, well north of 1 million pay-per-view sales. In fact, I believe it was around 1.5 million pay-per-view sales. The first fight was a blockbuster. And the folklore from that first fight is that it was closer than the scorecards, right? Cotto thought it was closer than the scorecards. Cotto left the ring, didn't give a post-fight interview, even though he's a gentleman, right? And of course, Floyd had visible proof that he had just been tested for 12 rounds. His face was puffed up after the fight in a way that we hadn't seen Floyd's face puffed up. And this was that rare fight where, as you watched it, even though you thought Floyd was winning the fight, in the 10th, 11th, and 12th rounds, Miguel Cotto was still coming forward on Floyd Mayweather. He was still trying to win the fight. Now let's think about it from Mayweather's standpoint. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it might not seem like that big a deal right now. But if you're interested in legacy, given that some of the biggest names in boxing history were middleweight champions, right? Carlos Monzon, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins, right? The middleweight division has a mythology. Sugar Ray Robinson, right? Floyd Mayweather right now, if Cotto goes ahead and fights Hassan and Jickum, and let's face it, we know Miguel Cotto is fearless. He's not afraid of Hassan and Jickum, right? If Cotto goes ahead and fights Hassan and Jickum and beats him, Floyd's going to have a tough decision to make. Because the one thing we know about Miguel Cotto is that nothing bothers Cotto more than a loss. Right? That Antonio Margarito loss was in his craw. Cotto knew he needed to fight Antonio Margarito again. You got to be kidding yourself if you don't think that Cotto, who left the ring immediately after that Mayweather fight, isn't replaying the fight in his head, thinking about how he could have improved his performance, and just hoping for a rematch. This is how warriors are, right? For Cotto, it's not about titles as much as it is about challenges. So I have no doubt that if Floyd Mayweather gets out of detention and is willing to fight Cotto for the middleweight championship of the world, I have no doubt that Cotto would jump at the opportunity. None whatsoever. Because Cotto wants to fight the best. Cotto wants vindication. He wants revenge. Right? 10, 20 years from now, are people going to remember that Floyd Mayweather was able to, after getting titles at several weight classes, most recently the 154-pound title, win the middleweight championship of the world? You bet. You bet. Right? Manny Pacquiao, God bless him, he lost to Timothy Bradley. We can argue about that. You know what? Just look at the official record. He lost to Timothy Bradley. He still has unfinished business with Juan Manuel Marquez, right? I understand a huge portion of the public wants Pacquiao to fight Mayweather. The bottom line is Mayweather has other options. They're mouth-watering. They're intriguing. They might include a shot at winning the middleweight championship of the world. Let's go one step further. There is a great middleweight. In fact, let's even mix it up a bit. Given that the middleweight division has its elites fighting each other, understand that if Mayweather were able to win the middleweight title, or if Cotto beats Mayweather in a rematch, whoever wins that fight, if they wanted to, would have other tremendous fights on the horizon. Right? Just imagine if Sergio Martinez beats Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Could you imagine Mayweather versus Martinez as a unification match at middleweight? I'll tell you what, whoever wins that fight is so big, we'd be talking about that fight years from now. Right? Not only that, Floyd would have, for legacy purposes, the bonus that Henry Armstrong and Ray Robinson had generations ago, in that as we would be watching Floyd at middleweight, we would know that he's fighting out of his division. He's really a great smaller man, fighting out of his division, taking on and hanging with bigger men. Right? That would be a big feather in his cap. That would spray deodorant, quite frankly, on the smell left by the fact that Manny and Floyd couldn't agree on drug testing protocol. That during their negotiations, it got so silly, one guy actually wanted a stadium built. Right? And so all I'm saying to you is this. Keep your eye on the ball here. Keep your eye on Miguel Cotto. Because Cotto holds a lot of cards. Right? And let me also point out too that Cotto knows how to fight low. And so against a taller opponent, Cotto knows how to give that opponent a hard time. Hassan Ngannou, let me say this too. If Hassan Ngannou does go ahead with the Cotto fight, and if he beats Cotto, just understand who Hassan Ngannou is. He's unbeaten, and he's been openly campaigning to fight the other big names at middleweight. He would be a big force in the sport. And so keep your eye on the middleweight division. In fact, keep your eye on guys not even in the middleweight division, Miguel Cotto, Floyd Mayweather, as possibly having a big impact on that division as we go forward. What does it all mean? It all means that in the next 12 months, wow, we're going to be treated to some great fights at middleweight. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for watching.